The whole region is part of that storytelling of the trade routes, and in our nature, we're just travelers and very adaptive. And to the east has to meet west. It's not, we're not a region that lived in a silo or away from the world. We're part of the trade routes, so we've adapted and we've cross-referenced and we've join different cultures together to become who we are today.
Welcome to One in Tribe. I am your host, Julie Fidalgo, and today I am very excited to have Zaid Faruqi with me. Zaid is the founder and creative director of Zaid Faruqi, a fashion house based out of Dubai. He is a dedicated, self-motivated, and highly collaborative individual with an ever-growing interest in luxury and fashion, creating one-of-a-kind pieces. His work has been featured in Bazaar Arabia, Vogue Arabia, among others. Most recently, his Shatwa, which is a traditional headpiece, was featured on Zayn's viral music video, Asli Ana. Thank you again, Zaid, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Zaid, I always like to start at the very beginning. Tell me where you and your family are from.
So we come from I'm originally Palestinian, but I grew up in the Palestinian diaspora, and so did my parents. So they were born in between Egypt and Saudi Arabia. I am third generation of my family that resided in Saudi Arabia with Jordanian passports. And after graduating high school, I actually moved to DC. We're also American, so I moved to DC eventually, where I got my degree in marketing and fine arts. Eventually making my way to Milan, getting a second degree in fashion design, and then moving to London. And then I eventually made my way to Dubai 10 years ago and started the label.
Very global. I love it. When did you discover that you wanted to be in the fashion world?
So I was in a typical Palestinian fashion. I was raised in a very storytelling household. And we grew up with a lot of storytelling about certain situations, certain moments, certain locations. And I believe as a child, I started developing this. I don't want to say these scenarios, these instances where I would imagine those people in different settings and different timelines and different eras. And I think that sparked a different type of, I would say, fairy tale in my head. And then having, I would say, inherited that talent from multiple avenues in my family, the ability to draw and paint and do all of that. I think it just manifested into this, it becoming my favorite medium. I'm capable of painting and sculpting, but my favorite medium is fashion.
So, and then you went to Milan to study fashion. And how was that experience?
So I believe I kind of went down that path where I was like, okay, let me get a business degree and then we can move forward. But even in my minor in fine arts, I noticed very much of an emphasis of figures. And actually one of my first projects as in sculpture work was an empty dress sitting in the middle of a hallway. And I believed like an empty dress would represent the wearer. And so, and you don't need to draw or sculpt the figure. And from there, the fascination of it, and then it evolved into fashion. And of course, the experience was very eye-opening because coming from a very business background to going to a very creative background, before I actually got my art, in my minor in fine arts, I had never touched a brush, a paintbrush, or a pen, or a drawing pencil. Like, it wasn't on the books. Like, it wasn't an option. Our option was to actually go into certain fields and follow suit in these fields, and that was it.
So, what was your family's reaction when you wanted to get into fashion?
I think very drastic, but then again, the fact that I had my business degree and that was like the deal all along, I was good to go. Like, I had the green light to pursue whatever I wanted.
And I think it's great that you actually have both worlds. The business, you understand the business side of it as well as the creative, and they go hand in hand, and they can help you obviously with your business of being a fashion designer.
Very true. And I highly appreciate that. But also, there happens to be, I would say, two personalities in one body, where the creative should never be the businessman and the businessman should never be the creative. And for you to fully create, you don't have to, or kind of embrace that soul and embrace that element. Sometimes as a creative, you don't need to be thinking about costs and budgets and sales targets and commerciality. You just want the freedom. Yet again, as a business individual, you solely want to think of that and how can you incorporate or how can you renew. So having that duality, sometimes it's two souls in one fighting each other to kind of create this outcome. And if something goes off balance, you're kind of become uninspired, or you're pushing way too much your product that might not see a business value. So it's a duality of both that some people have to live with.
And do you struggle? Is this like a day-to-day thing where you struggle between that business mind and the creative mind?
100%, yes. Yes.
And who wins?
Depends on the day. Yeah, but
Okay.
it really depends on the day. But it's quite interesting to see how that duality does exist.
You talked a lot about, or you touched upon storytelling.
Mm.
I want to hear a little bit more about that and how that comes into your work.
The storytelling aspect, as I mentioned, comes from my family members who were all three of my grandparents actually had to flee Palestine in 1948, except for one grandparent, which actually eventually left in 1967. So all of those stories of the past and what was and what could have been, I inherited. I grew up in living rooms and salons where it is reminiscing about the past or reminiscing about certain instances, even their travels, being even the fact that they traveled from country to country, or at that point from continent to continent, and figure out how their life was going to be, is quite important. Grew up with photos from both sets of my grandparents, photos of their houses that they lost actually framed on the walls, or certain cushions being embroidered with the form of or the embroidery motifs of every single city that they're from, or the colors. I think that is, and the storytelling never ends, because you go to your great aunt, or you go to another aunt, or you go to another uncle, and different stories erupt. So that aspect was just phenomenal to me. And I think storytelling in all aspects in life is, I think we're all but a story. Like, we're just a story to be told.
I find it so beautiful that Palestinians have this thing where, first of all, they're so proud from where they come from. And no matter how many generations, they keep that in them. And I just find it so beautiful. And now more than ever, people are learning about this place called Palestine. And for you to use it in your fashion and in your designs, I think is just so beautiful.
So to kind of reiterate that, I always say I'm a fashion designer that just had happened to be of Palestinian origin. So I don't, not all my designs are inspired, but it just happens to be. And it happens to be that we have an rich history. And therefore, I relate to that because growing or getting to learn the creative industry, we are but a box of experiences and a box of everything visual we've seen from childhood to adulthood. And it's whatever you point your eyes to, it's whatever gets saved in the back of your head. And so this is my factory setting, I would say, from being a child. My factory setting is being a Palestinian, evolved to become a fashion designer. And therefore, when I relate back to anything, it is actually the fact that that's my factory setting. That's my default setting.
Beautifully said. I love that. Yeah, we all have that, right? We all have our history, and like you said, we all have a story. And it's just beautiful that you can translate that story into your work. Now, let's talk a little bit about what your design process looks like.
Fair. So
A loaded question.
and there's different avenues for our design process. So we create a lot of one-of-a-kind pieces or custom-made pieces. So there's two avenues where sometimes I want to feed my artistic ego, and I ask the team that we start creating and start producing something that I have envisioned, and then later on we can figure out whether we want to, where it gets placed on, how it's retailed, what sort it's used. Second thing is the way that we actually get approached with a client, whether it's a private client, whether it's an artist, whether it's for a music video, whatever it is. We actually create these pieces specifically to them. And what happens usually is we get a certain idea of the event they're going to, or event they're hosting, or a music video mood board, or work with the stylist to kind of achieve a look for the red carpet looks. And I think that's where the exciting bit happens, because I get to sit here on my desk and just get down to sketching. So usually we go down from 3-4 different variations. After the first meeting, we narrow it down to one with adjustments. It happens, and then we start with our fitting process. So we start with our first fitting, our second fitting, and our third fitting is handed over. And I think that's the process through it all, both for men and women as well. And as I mentioned, all the inspiration I realized is through research and through what I see and what I deconstruct from this world.
And what is your favorite part of the entire process? Is it coming up with the ideas, or is it actually putting the piece together or seeing the final product?
My favorite thing, I believe, is I love, I know it might not sound grammatically correct if I say it, but I love when I use my brain, if that makes sense. So I love when I'm challenged. And I think the fact that I'm challenged to create this design, or sometimes it's designed on paper and I need to take it onto a different form, and when it translates into fabric, it does not look the same because it's a completely different medium. And I like these challenges. That's my favorite thing, where like I've actually ripped dresses open or suits open on the client because it didn't suit their proportion. And so I need to alternate that. It looked great on paper, but then as in terms of proportion, when we're constructing during the first fitting, I will easily take up a scissor or a seam ripper and just like tear it apart and then figure out how proportionally it looks like and works out to be the right fit for the client.
When do you find yourself being challenged the most? Is it just sitting down and coming up with a new collection, or is it when you have to dress somebody for an event?
I think the most challenging thing, if I may, is because the type of work that I create is getting the right fit on your client and the client wearing the piece, not the piece wearing the client. And I think in that sense, when we're constructing, that's the most challenging bit. Because our pieces tend to be less traditional or more over the top, and you're designing for that person to wear it in a very specific way. And that's the most difficult thing. Because we do see a lot of people, especially in red carpet or music videos or events, where the piece is wearing them, not vice versa.
Can you think of a specific piece or person where you were like super challenged, and tell us what that was like?
I think in all terms, I think for every individual, I come in with the same amount of anxiety because I'm like, this needs to work, and I'm down to that every single detail. And anxiousness, I would say. So there isn't a specific individual or thing. But my favorite thing happens is when I do get commissioned and I'm given carte blanche. So we have blessed to have these clients where this is what we need, and then you know what, you decide, and we'll just see the piece in our first fitting. And that is, in a sense, because you want to design something that's amazing for them, but at the same time, it is because you're taking the decision.
So do you prefer like the freedom of creating something from your mind, or do you rather have direction of where to go with the piece? What do you prefer?
I prefer the freedom. And then once the first fitting, we understand the direction that they want, or for aesthetics or their preference, but the freedom is definitely very much preferred, I would say.
I was going through your Instagram and I saw a headpiece that you did for an influencer for, I guess, the bridal.
Oh, yeah,
her bridal.
yeah.
And that was just, yes, that was, talk about a statement piece.
We do have a lot of headpieces. If you've noticed, we've even done headpieces for Iris Afro. We've also done a couple of headpieces for featured in different magazines. Headpieces are actually taken, how I started creating them is because my full name as like a family name, it's Taji Farouqi, and Taji literally translates to my crown in Arabic. And in the region, I think if you were to, not I think, I believe if you were to look at anything as of the 50s previously, we walk around with headpieces. I think that diminished a lot in the whole region, but still, evidently, men wear the ghutta na'gal, the women still wear the hijab, and it's not looking at it from a religious point of view, looking at it from a cultural clothing aspect, that's still a headpiece. And so therefore, headpieces are such a big cultural aspect that we have that I wanted to emphasize. It's something that we've lost along the way in terms of fashion, but I believe that's our statement and has been for hundreds of years previously before that.
And how long does it usually take to create a headpiece like that?
It depends. So sometimes it can take from a few weeks to sometimes like a month. Sometimes you have to hand weave it. Sometimes you, because a lot of it has to do with R&D. And sometimes you just create this piece and then you're like, oh, okay, I didn't like the outcome that I had imagined. It's not the same. So we actually go back to the chopping board and like have to readjust it to get aesthetically, the piece aesthetically, like how we wanted it.
How would you describe your style?
Ooh. I think my style is my personal style or my creative style.
Do both.
My personal style is a millennial with Peter Pan syndrome that never grew up, I would say. So you'll still see me in overalls, denim overalls, like big baggy sweaters, denim on denim, the whole time. Like you'll see me rocking the same exact outfits that I rocked as a child. And my creative style, or when I do like to get dressed up, in my formal style, a lot of it is, and especially when I'm away on business meetings, etc. It's heavy tailoring, and I would say that for both men and women. So a lot of structure, a lot of tailoring that we create. But yet again, it is clothing that you're able to distinguish that you're of a different culture, and it's a celebration of the culture that you're from. For instance, we've created this jacket where it's a complete long coat. It's a coat, and the embroidery is white on white, but the embroidery is actually deconstructed motifs that actually tell the family history, as in terms of like the mother side of the family, their motif, the dad side of the family, the motifs. We do a lot of motifs as well. We've done a jacket recently where an author had a book for 48 stories of exile for the Nakba. And from every single story, we actually created a motif, and we just created this suit for her. So because she was going to go win an award. We've also created suitings with specific embroidery, or brooches. The tarbouche, like we for Petit Omo, we've created it where it's part of a bow tie. Certain elements where you're still wearing Western inspired clothing, but yet again a very strong element of our Eastern, and I would say culture is very evident, to the point that you're like, okay, this person is dressed differently, and you'll understand where they're coming from.
East meets West, which I love.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
as I say, we are, but I think the whole region is part of that storytelling of the trade routes, and in our nature, we're just travelers and very adaptive. And to the east has to meet west. We're not a region that lived in a silo or away from the world. We're part of the trade routes, so we've adapted, and we've cross-referenced, and we've joined different cultures together to become who we are today.
I think the Arab world seems so far away for some Westerners without realizing that we are, I mean, so connected. Even me, for example, I am Lebanese and Syrian on my mother's side, fifth generation, because they went to Brazil, and there's so much of that. And I interviewed another Lebanese the other day that was born in Africa. And it's just, the world is so globalized, yet it still seems so far away. So I think bringing them together, connection, whether it's through fashion, storytelling, movies, music, it's such a beautiful thing.
I agree, and I as you mentioned, you're fifth generation. I think the elements of our culture are so strong that they're inherited no matter what. And so it's crazy and fascinating to kind of see that, especially on a global scale.
In Brazil, some of our most famous dishes are kibbeh, esfirra. I mean, these are tabbouleh. These are Arabic, dishes fifth generation, but yet, a few years ago, I don't think it exists anymore. One of our fast chain restaurants was called Habibi's
Oh, wow.
that sold
Oh,
sfihas.
wow. Okay.
Yes, so it is very prominent. And I think people are becoming more interested in that side of the world, especially as the world becomes more globalized, and hence this podcast.
And I believe we as Arabs know, although we're going with a lot of turmoil as we see, but there is a bit of a cultural renaissance. And that we're going through, I believe, the beginnings of a Renaissance period in our region, and I believe it was also part of, we got so scattered in the world that we all held up into our culture in some way somehow, that even abroad we're trying to celebrate who we are in these as a third culture kid or a third culture individual. And I feel to a certain extent, whether it's American music or, for example, the reference to Latin America, or even in Europe, I think there is a lot of Arab, or I would say Swana, so Southwest Asia and North Africa, which is a better reference than MENA, the MENA region, or Middle East and North Africa, because the Middle East is referenced to the middle of what? So the Swana region, I think it's beautiful. It's beautiful, and it's creating these. You're seeing our musicians sing in Spanish and French and Italian and English. You see our supermodels. You see our artists. You see our actors. A lot having of that influence or descendants of certain people that migrated, which is beautiful in its all forms. And we all speak about our stories, and how we got there and how we've become ingrained into these cultures, but yet again our roots are still pretty strong. And I think that to certain essence scares a lot of people, but I think from that point of view it is such a beautiful element, because you're just surrounded by love no matter where you go.
People are afraid of the unknown. And I think, that's why it's so important to just get to know people and, get rid of the stereotypes. It just create empathy, because we're all humans.
We are all humans, exactly.
We're all cut from the same cloth.
And
Ooh, how'd you like that fashion?
no reference.
Yeah, that was, I love that. Now, the Swana, I've actually never heard of that. So is this a new term?
So it is a term that's been used in the past few years in referencing the Middle East and North Africa. So what they call the MENA region. But it's actually Swana. So it's Southwest Asia and North Africa.
Zaid, what is, going back to fashion, what is the most meaningful piece you've ever created?
Ooh. The most meaningful? I think all my creations have intention. Like nothing is created out of just like an empty vase, but I would like to maybe talk about a collab that preceded its time. And we, in 2020, end of 2019, beginning of 2020, I had a college friend of mine from DC who also moved to Dubai, of Syrian origin actually, call me up and she's like, I have a collab idea that you can do as a business. and we launched with a poet. She had located a Bahraini poet, so back from Bahrain. This poet had it was her first time writing Arabic poetry, but it was our launch together about kind of creating an exclusive poem about what it means to be of the region, moving through the region, and having one tongue and celebrating that. So in essence, it was talking about our story of being part of the diaspora, the Palestinian diaspora, or the Arab diaspora, but within the Arab nations, and celebrating our identity with our food, our culture, how we cross through territories using one tongue, one ethics, and it was a beautiful poem. And I think that preceded its time, in a sense where I think it's touching a lot of people now, 5 years later, 4 years later, than when we launched it back in 2020.
And what exactly was the piece based on the poetry?
All the pieces were like jackets to t-shirts to sweaters, all having exclusive poetry onto it that we created.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Beautiful. How do your designs reflect the culture that we live in?
I think my designs represent a person that is traveled, appreciative of artisanal work, and I would say wants to. I don't know. It's not even about sending a message, but it's actually fully confident about who they are.
I'm so touched by your work, and I think it's because I love this connection with the storytelling and culture and acceptance. These are all concepts that I really appreciate. So I admire you and your work for touching upon those concepts.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Really
Honestly,
nice.
I always want to say it's not me. It's just it's what the world presented to me, and it's just like it's I somehow I think of it as like this is not my it's not my job. It's what I was given to kind of do in this world. So I want to tell you thank you, but in an essence as well, it's like I feel like I'm not doing enough in a sense because this is what I'm able to do in this world.
Yeah, I think we're all born with a gift and we're all born with something. And I think if we have the courage to follow our heart and our mind to do what we believe we should do, then that's when we know we're headed in the right direction.
Correct.
Who is your dream person to dress?
I think I've been asked this way too many times before.
Oh,
No, but I will answer it the way that I say it. Always. Because I never answered with one person. And I think until I can dress the I don't want to say average, until I can actually dress every single person in a way, in an outfit or a garb that actually empowers them, that is my dream person. I think there's nothing more beautiful than when you dress someone and it automatically they put on something that you designed for them, or they've seen something even from the ready to wear collection when they put it on and you just see that glow. And I think that's the person that I want to dress. That's my dream person.
well said.
I think.
So on that note, what is your dream for Zaid Farouki? Like when can you sit back and say, "Wow, I accomplished what I meant to set out to do?
I think it's a lifelong journey. And I think, and in a sense, to me, I view it as maybe, you know what, maybe I'll finish working when I'm 6 feet under. That's the only way that you can actually stop me from working or producing artwork or something in the creative world. When I can say I have accomplished that, until I actually have, I think I don't want to say there's a message, but I think showing the world how much beauty there is out there in just looking in within, especially from our region. And I think from that is when I can actually say, we see all these heritage brands all throughout the world, whether it's super French, super Italian, super Americano, super, I don't want to name them, but you understand. There's these like staple, like you think America, you think one fashion designer, you think France, one fashion designer, you think Italy, and I think in essence, it is not that. It's actually taking our culture in a very beautiful element. And thankfully, we have in the region a lot of designers who have led the way and have become such household names. But on the other side, I also want to be part of that, where our artisanal work and the beauty that we have, you just take a look at it and you're like, no way, that's his work, that's their work, that's what they do. And once you kind of see a piece, automatically that's a Zaid Farouqi. Like that's it. Whether it goes from eventually, hopefully one day, from furniture all the way up to clothing, all the way up to could be a glass of water, like, or a water glass, or whatever it is, or a vase, but understanding that this came out from our creative vision.
You touched a little bit upon, the culture and the richness of the region. And because this is a podcast about the Arab world and Arabs, what are some of the cultures or something culturally that really you hold dear to you, or a tradition?
I think there's so many traditions that we do day to day that I hold so dear to myself. But something that I find so beautiful, correct? Is the question, something that I find so beautiful within. And I have to say, all of us have our flaws as individuals, but no matter where I traveled, no matter where I lived, there was always the availability where an Arab's home was always open. And it's always open. There's food on the table. If you're not there to eat, you're going to drink something. You're going to be force fed. You're going to be, I don't know what it is, but homes are open and individuals are open, in a sense that once, I think there is a very formality phase, but once you're over that formality, I think these relationships are for life, whether they're family relationships, whether they're friendships, whether they're even acquaintances. It's a lifetime kind of commitment. And I love that because having lived abroad, there's a different element of how you come along through relationships and friendships and family and all of that. But no, there's a lifelong commitment. You're like, you know what? You walked into my life. It must be fate. So here I am, stuck to you for the rest of my life. And that's very beautiful to a certain, and I love and miss that whenever I'm away.
Yeah, an Arab home is very unique to other homes. I've traveled to many places, and one thing that I hope that people will take with them is the kindness, the generosity, and the hospitality of the Arab world is unlike anything I have ever experienced anywhere else.
I concur, but like I could be biased, you know? That's all I know.
But it's true. It's true.
On it, and I must say, it is a very, people view us very differently, but in a sense, we are very, especially the area that we're from, which is the Levant, which is, and I think, if you want to break it down, the Levant is Jordan, Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon. And the Levant, specifically the Levant, we're a Mediterranean culture. There is no difference between us and the Greeks or the Italians, but we just happen to be speaking Arabic. We happen to be on that side of the Mediterranean coast. But it's a fusion of, I feel like it's such a beautiful fusion of Arab and being Mediterranean at the same time. You still have the loud houses, you still have the grandmas, you have like there's no difference. Like if you were to drive throughout that coast entirely, it's super similar. So it is a very Mediterranean essence with a very Arab heart.
So what if you had one message to tell the Western world? And you're American, you're Arab American, you went to college in DC, but what is something that you would want the Western world to know about Arabs, the Arab world, anything?
If there's one thing that I would kind of ask for them to do, and I think a lot of people are going to, is not be scared because someone is different. And I think that's the most important thing. And if you are, go into someone, ask, become friends, or you know what? They're most likely, if they're not, they're most likely invite you to their place. Other cultures are very inviting. And I don't know, share bread with them and then figure out if you still have that hate in your heart or not. Like, especially at this point. I think travel, and I think reading history from another perspective as well is very important, especially with the dynamics that we're living right now. But in a sense, if I were to look at from that point of view, there's beauty in difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that would be my only message. There's beauty in difference.
There's this quote that says, if you don't like somebody, get to know them more. And it's kind of the same thing. If you don't know somebody, get to know them more. And I think the minute that you become interested in the person as a human being, they start to open up. And then it becomes this situation where both can kind of drop their guard and see each other for who we are or for who they are.
I agree. And I think it is super important to kind of also view history from a non-Western point of view.
Like somebody said, the victors always write their own history.
صح.
Zaid, it has been a pleasure getting to...
The pleasure is all mine.
Where can our audience or my audience find you?
So we're on all social media platforms. I'm a heavy user of Instagram. So you can find me at Zaid Farouqi. You can actually even check out our online store or our store, and easily accessible on all social media platforms. Yeah, just feel free to reach out if you have any questions or concerns or just to say hi.
Awesome. Two things. Do you deliver worldwide?
We do.
Okay. And I never asked you about Dubai. What's it like living in Dubai?
Oh my God, I love it. I love it. I've been here for 10 years now. I love it.
What do you love about it?
Honestly, what's not to love, I guess. Um, okay, so also could be very because this is where I started off my career, and this is why I love it. I love the ease in it. I love all of that aspect, and I love how central it is, where we can travel anywhere. The services, the 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 list goes on. The list goes on and on and on. But this will be almost the longest city I've ever lived in. So
Wow.
until plans change, this is home. I've been here for a decade now, as of last December.
Mabruk.
Thank you. We're waiting for you to visit. Have you ever been?
Inshallah. I haven't been to Dubai yet. I haven't been to the UAE. I went to Jordan last year in 2024, but this year I'm planning on visiting Saudi,
Okay.
and inshallah I'll stop by Dubai.
Where are you going in Saudi?
Well, I have a really good friend that lives in Riyadh,
Okay.
but I feel like if I go to Riyadh, I need to go to Jeddah. And I also want to go to Aula,
Allah, Allah.
Alaula.
I always recommend Jeddah because that's where my dad's side of the family resides. We're third generation there, and that's why I was like cheering up. Always go to Jeddah as well. It's such a beautiful port city, and well, that's a history, and the fusion over there is beautiful.
Yeah, and Saudi now with the 2030 Vision 2030, it's opening up and all the resorts. I follow a lot of people and it's just the country is just opening up and I definitely need to make my way over there.
Yeah, you should, and let me know whenever you're on this side. So we'll definitely get to see you.
Will do. Thank you, Zaid,
Thank
so
you.
much. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, follow, comment, review. I mean, there is so much to do with this podcast. Help me get the word out there. And I really appreciate you for joining, and I'll see you next time. Bye.